On the freezing streets of New York, a German shepherd named Rex, once a heroic K9 rescue dog, now finds herself a single mother to 4 tiny puppies, struggling to survive the harsh winter. How did a dog who dedicated her life to saving others end up abandoned and fighting to protect her family in an unforgiving city? And could hope still find its way to this little family in their darkest hour? Join us as we uncover this heartwarming and miraculous story. Rex was a dog of unmatched bravery and loyalty. For years she had served as a rescue dog, saving lives in dangerous situations. Whether it was leading lost hikers to safety, pulling survivors from debris, or finding people in need during disasters, Rex had been a symbol of hope and resilience. Her sharp instincts, calm demeanor, and unwavering dedication made her a hero in every sense of the word. But after years of service, Rex's days as a rescuer came to an end. She retired, expecting a peaceful life in a loving home. Instead, she was adopted by Carl, a man who cared little for her heroic past. Carl didn't see Rex as a companion. He saw her as a tool. Carl's plan was to use Rex for his petty criminal schemes. He believed her intelligence and obedience could be exploited to help him in thefts, but Rex's loyalty wasn't for sale. She refused to follow Carl's dishonest commands, and her defiance only fueled his frustration. Carl, angry and impatient, decided she was no longer useful. One cold December night, he drove deep into the city, opened the car door, and pushed Rex out onto the street. Without a second glance, he sped away, leaving her behind in the biting cold. Rex stood motionless in the snow, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The world she had known was gone. She was no longer a respected rescue dog, no longer part of a team that valued her. She was alone. But not entirely alone. Unknown to Carl, Rex had recently given birth to a litter of 4 tiny puppies. Max, the bold and curious one, Luna, the gentle and shy one, Buddy, full of playful energy, and Bella, the smallest and most fragile. Her life now revolved around them. Despite her own fear and exhaustion, Rex's instincts as a mother drove her to protect her pups at all costs. Rex led her puppies to an alleyway where she found a small nook between 2 crumbling buildings. It wasn't much, but it offered some shelter from the wind and snow. She curled her body around her puppies, shielding them from the cold with her fur. Max nuzzled against her side, already showing signs of his bold personality. Luna stayed close to her mother, her soft brown eyes reflecting quiet trust. Buddy, despite the dire circumstances, pawed at the snowflakes that floated down, bringing a rare moment of lightness to their dark situation. Bella, the smallest and frailest, huddled close, her tiny body trembling against Rex's warmth. The streets of New York were unkind. Food was scarce, and Rex quickly realized that survival would be a daily struggle. She scavenged through trash bins, searching for scraps to feed her puppies. Every piece of food she found, no matter how small, went to them first. She drank from puddles of freezing water to keep herself going, her own hunger and thirst secondary to their needs. Other stray dogs, hungry and territorial, often growled and lunged at her when she ventured too close to their turf. She avoided fights, knowing she couldn't risk injury with 4 lives depending on her. Passers-by, bundled against the cold, either ignored her or chased her away when she came too close, mistaking her desperation for aggression. Rex's body began to show the toll of her circumstances. Her once strong frame grew gaunt, her ribs visible beneath her thinning coat. Her fur, once sleek and glossy, became matted and dull. Her paws, used to traversing rugged terrains during her rescue days, were now raw and cracked from the icy streets. But no matter how weak she became, Rex refused to give up. She carried the weight of her pups' survival on her shoulders, and their tiny faces gave her the strength to keep going. Each day, she ventured further into the city, searching for food and shelter, her body aching but her resolve unbroken. Rex's life as a hero had been filled with challenges, but none as relentless as this. Now, Her greatest mission was to protect her family, even as the harsh winter and unforgiving streets tried to break her. Her once proud amber eyes now held a quiet determination, a mother's love stronger than any hardship. For Rex, survival wasn't just about enduring, it was about ensuring that her puppies had a chance at life, even if it meant sacrificing everything she had left. The wind howled through the narrow streets of New York, carrying with it the bitter chill of a December night. Rex moved through the snow with her 4 puppies close to her side, her breath visible in the freezing air. Her paws, raw and aching, pressed forward with determination. The streets had been merciless, but she couldn't stop. Her pups needed warmth, and the biting cold was draining their strength. Then, through the snowy haze, Rex saw it, a large building with warm light spilling from its tall windows, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. St. Mary's Hospital. Its glowing entrance seemed to call out to her, promising shelter from the relentless winter. Rex hesitated for only a moment before nudging her puppies forward. They needed to get inside, no matter the risk. The automatic doors of the hospital hissed open as Rex stepped cautiously inside, the warmth of the lobby hitting her like a gentle embrace. The scent of antiseptic and faint murmurs of conversation filled the air, a stark contrast to the harsh silence of the streets. Rex led her puppies to a quiet corner where they huddled close, their tiny bodies finally able to relax after days of relentless cold. Her once majestic coat was matted and dirty, her frame gaunt from hunger, yet her posture remained protective and dignified. She curled around her pups, shielding them from view with her body, her ears twitching at every sound. The sight of Rex and her puppies did not go unnoticed for long. Nurses passing through the lobby paused, their curious glances softening as they realized what they were seeing. One nurse, a kind woman named Emily, was the first to approach. "Oh my goodness," Emily whispered, crouching at a safe distance. "You poor thing. Where did you come from?" Rex's amber eyes locked onto Emily, wary but not aggressive. Her body remained tense, ready to defend her pups, but something about Emily's calm voice and gentle demeanor kept her grounded. Emily slowly reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a granola bar. She unwrapped it carefully, breaking off a small piece and placing it on the floor between them. "Here, girl. You need this more than I do," Emily said softly. Rex sniffed the food cautiously before taking it. The warmth of the small act broke through her wariness, and for the first time in weeks, her tail wagged faintly. Word of the dog and her puppies spread quickly through the hospital. Doctors, nurses, and even patients began stopping by the corner where Rex had settled. They offered scraps of food, blankets, and even soft words of encouragement. Despite her exhaustion, Rex remained vigilant, her protective instincts ensuring no one got too close to her pups without her approval. It was a young nurse who gave her a name. Watching Rex curl her body around the puppies like a shield, the nurse remarked, "She's like a guardian angel for them." The name Guardian stuck, and soon everyone at the hospital began calling her that. Despite her rough appearance, Guardian's care for her puppies was undeniable. She cleaned them meticulously, nudged them gently to eat when food was offered, and ensured they stayed warm by wrapping them in her body. Her strength and love for her little ones inspired those who watched, bringing a sense of comfort to a place often filled with pain and worry. One older patient, sitting in a wheelchair near the lobby, watched Guardian for a long time before saying, "She reminds me of my old dog, brave, loyal, and always looking out for the family." The comment sparked nods from others nearby who couldn't help but feel a connection to the weary mother-dog. As the night deepened, the hospital quieted down. The bustling energy of the day gave way to a peaceful hum of distant machinery and muffled voices. Guardian allowed herself to relax for the first time in days. Her puppies, now fed and warm, snuggled into her side, their tiny snores creating a soothing rhythm. For Guardian, this was not yet home, but it was a sanctuary. The cold and hunger of the streets felt far away, and for the first time since being abandoned, she felt a flicker of hope. She didn't know how long they would be allowed to stay, but for now, her family was safe, and that was all that mattered. As dawn began to break, Guardian stretched her stiff limbs, her mind already racing with thoughts of what came next. She knew she couldn't stay forever, but the kindness she had encountered here gave her a sense of reassurance. Perhaps in this place there was still hope for her and her little family. Little did she know, her presence had already begun to inspire change, not just in her puppies, but in the hearts of everyone around her. Guardian's journey was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't face it alone. Dr. Henry Carter was a man of precision and logic. As one of the top cardiologists at St. Mary's Hospital, his reputation was built on his unmatched skill and unwavering dedication to his patients. But among his colleagues, Henry was known for something else, his cold demeanor. He spoke only when necessary, his sharp blue eyes always focused on the task at hand. To many, he seemed detached, a man who had long buried his emotions beneath layers of clinical expertise. One late night, as Henry made his rounds in the quiet hospital, something unusual caught his eye. In the far corner of the lobby, near a row of empty chairs, he noticed a disheveled dog curled protectively around a cluster of tiny puppies. The sight stopped him in his tracks. At first, he dismissed it. The hospital had no shortage of unexpected visitors, from pigeons that wandered in through open windows to stray cats that prowled the parking lot. Yet there was something different about this dog. Her fur, though matted and dirty, hinted at a past life of strength and purpose. Her body, lean and weary, was arranged in a way that shielded the puppies completely. But it was her eyes that drew him in. Deep, amber pools filled with exhaustion, sadness, and an unyielding resolve. Henry's initial instinct was to walk away. He had patients waiting, cases to review, and a schedule that left no room for distractions. But as he started to turn, the smallest puppy stirred, letting out a faint whimper. The dog, whom Henry later learned was called Guardian, immediately perked up, licking the puppy and nuzzling it closer. Her care was instinctive, unwavering, and deeply moving. Curiosity got the better of him, and Henry approached cautiously. Guardian's head lifted, her eyes meeting his with a mix of wariness and defiance. She didn't growl or bare her teeth, but her body tensed, making it clear she was ready to defend her pups if necessary. Henry stopped a few steps away, crouching to her level. "Easy, girl," he murmured, his voice softer than he expected. "I'm not here to hurt you." Guardian didn't move, but her gaze stayed locked on him, unblinking. Henry took out a protein bar from his pocket, unwrapped it, and placed a small piece on the floor between them. "You look like you could use this," he said quietly, watching her reaction. Guardian hesitated, sniffing the air cautiously before leaning forward to take the offering. She ate quickly, then looked back at him, her expression less guarded. It was a small moment, but it stayed with Henry as he walked away to continue his rounds. Over the next few days, Henry found himself drawn back to Guardian and her puppies. He began carrying extra food in his coat pocket, stopping by their corner whenever he had a spare moment. The nurses teased him about his newfound soft spot, but he brushed off their remarks. "Just making sure they're not causing trouble," he'd say, though the excuse felt hollow even to him. Each visit brought new observations. He noticed how Guardian never ate until her puppies were fed, how she would nudge the smallest one, Bella, closer to her body to keep her warm. Despite her own weariness, Guardian's devotion never wavered. Henry started leaving bowls of water and scraps of food for her when no one was looking. He even brought an old blanket from his car, laying it down to give her a softer place to rest. The act felt strangely personal, a quiet acknowledgement of her struggle. One evening, after a particularly long day, Henry found himself lingering near Guardian's corner. The hospital was quiet, the usual bustle replaced by the soft hum of monitors and distant footsteps. He crouched down, observing Guardian as she cleaned her puppies with slow, deliberate motions. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he said, his voice low. Guardian glanced at him, her amber eyes meeting his once again. There was no fear this time, only a quiet understanding. Henry exhaled, leaning back against the wall. "You remind me of someone," he admitted, though he wasn't sure why he was talking to a dog. Someone who never gave up, no matter how hard things got. The memory of his late wife flickered in his mind, a woman whose resilience had carried them through some of the darkest times of their lives. She had always believed in second chances, in finding light even in the bleakest moments. As the days turned into weeks, Guardian became a fixture in Henry's routine. He found himself seeking her out, not just to provide for her, but to simply sit and watch. There was something about her quiet strength that resonated with him, a reminder of the compassion he had once felt but had buried under years of clinical detachment. Guardian, in turn, began to trust him. She would wag her tail faintly when he approached, and her puppies seemed to grow more comfortable in his presence. Max, the boldest of the litter, even ventured close enough to sniff his shoes one evening, earning a rare smile from the stoic doctor. For the first time in years, Henry felt a shift within himself. Guardian and her puppies had become more than just stray animals in need of help. They were a mirror to his own journey, a reminder that even in the face of abandonment and hardship, resilience and love could prevail. And though he didn't fully understand it yet, Guardian was changing him, softening the walls he had built around his heart, one small act of kindness at a time. The snow fell lightly outside as Margaret and her grandson, Oliver, stepped into the warm lobby of St. Mary's Hospital. Margaret, a long-time patient, was well known to the staff, her kind demeanour a welcome presence during her regular visits. Oliver, always energetic and curious, clung to her hand as they approached the reception desk. But something in the corner of the lobby caught Margaret's attention. She stopped, mid-step, her gaze fixed on a German shepherd lying protectively over a small group of puppies. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Look at her. That dog. She looks familiar." Oliver followed her gaze, his eyes lighting up. "Wow, Grandma! She's amazing. Can we go see her?" Margaret nodded, though her steps were slow and hesitant as she approached. Her heart raced, memories flooding her mind with each step closer to the dog. Guardian, as the hospital staff had named her, lifted her head at the sound of approaching footsteps. Her amber eyes, always alert, watched the pair carefully. She remained still, her body instinctively shielding her pups. Margaret crouched a short distance away, her breath catching as she took in the sight before her. "It can't be," she murmured to herself, her voice shaking. "Grandma, what is it?" Oliver asked, curiosity filling his voice. Margaret's eyes glistened with emotion. "Years ago, I was in an accident. My car slid off an icy road into a ditch, and I was trapped, with no one around to help." She paused, her gaze never leaving Guardian. But then, out of nowhere, a German shepherd came. She barked and dug at the snow until someone finally noticed and came to rescue me. Oliver's jaw dropped. "You think this is the same dog?" Margaret nodded slowly. "I'll never forget those eyes. It has to be her." Oliver, now even more excited, took a step closer to Guardian, crouching low to meet her gaze. "Hi there, girl," he said softly. Guardian sniffed the air, her ears twitching as Oliver inched closer. With a hesitant wag of her tail, she allowed the boy to reach out and gently pat her head. "She remembers you, Grandma," Oliver said, his voice brimming with certainty. Margaret reached out her hand, her movements slow and careful. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her face as she gently stroked Guardian's head. "And now, it's our turn to save you." Guardian tilted her head slightly, her eyes locking with Margaret's. It was as if she understood, as if she too remembered. Oliver looked up at his grandmother, his voice filled with determination. "Grandma, We have to take her home. She needs us. And look, she has puppies. They deserve a warm house too. Margaret wiped her tears, nodding firmly. You're right, Oliver. We owe her more than we could ever repay. She's been a guardian angel once. Now it's time to give her the home she deserves. The decision was made, and the family's intentions were clear. They would bring Guardian and her pups into their lives, offering them safety, warmth, and love in return for everything Guardian had once given. The story of Guardian, the courageous German shepherd protecting her 4 puppies, had quickly become a heartwarming tale that spread beyond the walls of St. Mary's Hospital. Photos of Guardian curled protectively around her pups, videos of her interactions with staff and patients, and the touching story of her past with Margaret had all gone viral on social media. People from all over shared messages of admiration and support, marveling at Guardian's resilience and love. But not all attention was welcome. Among those who came across the story was Carl, the man who had abandoned Guardian in the freezing streets of New York. Sitting in his cluttered apartment, Carl scrolled through his phone, his expression darkening as he read about the fame the dog was receiving. That dog, he muttered to himself. She's all over the internet now. People love her. There's money to be made here. The idea took root quickly. Carl saw an opportunity, not to redeem himself, but to exploit Guardian's growing popularity. The next morning, Carl showed up at St. Mary's Hospital unannounced. Dressed in a worn leather jacket, he strode into the lobby, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Guardian and her pups. "That's my dog," he declared loudly, his voice cutting through the soft hum of the hospital. Guardian immediately stiffened, her ears flattening as she recognized the man who had caused her so much pain. She curled tighter around her puppies, her body trembling slightly. Carl's sudden appearance startled the hospital staff, including Dr. Henry Carter, who had just entered the lobby. Henry approached cautiously, his sharp blue eyes narrowing as he took in Carl's rough demeanor. "Can I help you?" Henry asked, his tone calm but firm. "Yeah, you can," Carl replied, crossing his arms. "That dog over there? She's mine. I've been looking for her for weeks." Henry's gut told him something was off. He glanced at Guardian, noting her visible fear and tension. This was not the reaction of a dog who recognized a loving owner. "You abandoned her, didn't you?" Henry asked bluntly, his voice growing colder. Carl's eyes flickered with annoyance. "That's none of your business. She's my dog, and I want her back." Before Henry could respond, Margaret stepped forward, her voice shaking with anger. "You're the one who left her in the streets, aren't you? You don't deserve to have her." Carl scoffed, his tone turning defensive. "You don't know what you're talking about, lady. That dog is mine, and I have every right to take her." Henry wasn't about to back down. "If that's true, you'll have no problem proving it. But before you make any claims, I'd like to know what your intentions are. Why now? Why come back for her after all this time?" Carl faltered for a moment, but quickly recovered. "I don't need to explain myself to you. Just hand over the dog, or I'll call the cops." "Go ahead," Henry said coolly, crossing his arms. "In fact, I insist on it. While you're at it, we can also discuss the legal consequences of abandoning an animal and the visible signs of neglect she's endured." Carl's face reddened, but before he could respond, Henry turned to a nearby nurse. "Call security. I'd like to keep this gentleman here while we sort this out." The confrontation caught the attention of everyone in the lobby. Patients, staff, and visitors began gathering, their eyes filled with concern for Guardian and disdain for Carl. A few began recording the scene on their phones, further amplifying the situation. Carl, realizing he was losing control of the narrative, tried to play the victim. "She ran away, okay? I've been worried sick about her, and now I find out she's here, and you're keeping her from me." Henry didn't buy it for a second. "If you cared about her, why didn't you report her missing? Why didn't you look for her before she became the center of attention online?" "No, Mr. Carl. I think you're here for your own selfish reasons, not for her well-being." Henry's suspicions were confirmed when he did some quick digging. With the help of a few phone calls and online records, he uncovered Carl's history, multiple complaints of animal neglect and a recent eviction notice suggesting financial desperation. Carl's motives became clear. He wasn't here for Guardian out of love or remorse. He wanted to exploit her newfound fame for money. Armed with this information, Henry contacted local animal welfare authorities, sharing Guardian's story and Carl's past behavior. Within hours, officers arrived at the hospital to investigate. Carl's protests grew louder as they questioned him, but the mounting evidence left little room for doubt. Guardian's physical condition, combined with witness accounts of her abandonment, painted a damning picture. As the authorities escorted Carl out of the hospital, his threats and excuses fell on deaf ears. The staff and patients who had gathered erupted into quiet applause, their relief palpable. Guardian, who had been watching the ordeal from her corner, finally relaxed as Carl disappeared from view. Her pups, sensing her calm, began to play at her feet, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. Henry crouched beside Guardian, gently stroking her head. "He won't hurt you again," he said softly. "You're safe now." Margaret, standing nearby, nodded in agreement. "You've done so much for others, Guardian. Now it's time for us to do right by you." With Carl out of the picture, Guardian's future was secure. She would finally have the loving home and care she had always deserved, free from fear and pain. The ordeal, though difficult, had brought her one step closer to a life of peace and happiness. The days that followed Carl's removal were a whirlwind of decisions for Dr. Henry Carter. Guardian and her 4 puppies had become a cornerstone of the hospital, their presence bringing warmth and joy to everyone who encountered them. Patients smiled more, staff found renewed energy, and even Henry himself felt his heart soften in ways he hadn't expected. But as much as he wanted to keep Guardian and her pups close, Henry knew deep down that the hospital wasn't a permanent home. Guardian needed stability, a safe place where she and her puppies could grow and thrive without the transience of a busy medical environment. Margaret's offer to adopt Guardian and her puppies lingered in his mind. It was the best choice for them, he knew, but that didn't make it any easier. One evening, as the hospital quieted down, Henry sat in his office, staring at the framed photo one of the nurses had taken of Guardian and her puppies. They were all nestled together, Guardian's watchful eyes looking directly at the camera. The thought of saying goodbye tugged at him in a way he hadn't felt in years. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Emily, the young nurse who had been one of Guardian's earliest supporters. "You've been staring at that photo all day," Emily said with a small smile, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "Still thinking about Margaret's offer?" Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful. "They'll be happy with her, won't they?" "They will," Emily replied gently. "Margaret and Oliver adore Guardian. They'll give her the love and care she deserves. And you know she'll always be a part of this hospital, even if she's not here." Henry sighed, running a hand through his greying hair. "I know it's the right thing to do. It's just hard." The day of the goodbye came quickly. Margaret and Oliver arrived early, their faces glowing with excitement. They brought with them soft blankets, toys, and even a sturdy new collar for Guardian. Oliver had been counting down the days, eagerly preparing for the new members of their family. Guardian seemed to sense the significance of the moment. She stood protectively over her puppies, her tail wagging faintly as Margaret knelt down beside her. "Hello again, sweetheart," Margaret said softly, stroking Guardian's head. "It's time to come home." Oliver crouched nearby, his hands gently patting the puppies. "Don't worry, Guardian," he said with a grin. "We're going to take such good care of you." Henry watched from a distance, his heart heavy, yet full of quiet pride. As Guardian and her puppies were gently transferred into Margaret's care, the lobby filled with an air of bittersweet anticipation. Guardian looked back at Henry, her amber eyes meeting his. There was no fear in her gaze, only trust and a sense of gratitude. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Henry knelt down, reaching out to scratch behind her ears one last time. "You've been through so much," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "And now, you're finally going to have the life you deserve." Guardian leaned into his touch, her tail wagging gently. It was her way of saying goodbye, her way of thanking him for everything. The hospital staff gathered to see them off, many holding back tears as Margaret and Oliver led Guardian and her puppies out into the crisp winter air. Some of the nurses hugged each other, while others waved and called out their well wishes. As the car pulled away, Guardian's head peeked out from the window, her eyes scanning the faces of the people who had cared for her. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a new beginning. For Margaret and Oliver, bringing Guardian and her puppies home was a moment of joy. The puppies quickly adapted to their new surroundings, exploring their warm new home with curiosity and excitement. Max, the boldest, claimed a spot near the fireplace, while Luna, Buddy, and Bella each found their own cozy nooks. Guardian, now surrounded by love and safety, began to relax. Her body, once tense with the weight of survival, softened. For the first time in months, she was at peace. Back at the hospital, Henry found himself adjusting to the absence of Guardian and her pups. The corner of the lobby where they had stayed felt empty, but their memory lingered in the smiles of patients and the conversations of staff. Though the goodbye had been painful, Henry knew he had made the right choice. Guardian had given so much of herself to others, and now she was finally receiving the love and care she deserved. In her absence, Henry carried with him the lessons she had taught him about resilience, compassion, and the unyielding power of love. Margaret's home, once marked by silence and lingering sorrow, slowly came alive with the sounds of happiness. Guardian and her 4 puppies brought an energy that radiated warmth, easing the weight of old grief. For years, Margaret had struggled with the pain of losing her husband, and Oliver, though a source of joy, couldn't fill the quiet spaces left behind. Now, those spaces were filled with playful barks, scampering paws, and the comforting presence of Guardian. Guardian adapted quickly to her new role in Margaret's household. She was more than just a companion, she was a protector, ensuring that Oliver was never far from her watchful eyes. The bond between the boy and the dog grew stronger with each passing day. "Guardian's amazing, Grandma," Oliver said one evening, brushing her thick fur as she rested by his feet. "It's like she knows when I'm feeling sad or scared." Margaret smiled, her eyes softening as she watched them together. "That's because she does, sweetheart. She's been through so much, and she understands what it means to care for others." The puppies, now growing stronger and more adventurous, filled the house with endless antics. Max led the charge in every game, bounding through the yard with boundless energy. Luna, more reserved, often stayed close to Guardian, while Buddy turned everything he found into a toy. Bella, the smallest, became Oliver's shadow, following him wherever he went. Guardian, for her part, seemed to take pride in her new life. She patrolled the yard with quiet confidence, her keen senses ensuring that Margaret and Oliver were always safe. At night, she would curl up near Oliver's bed, her presence a source of comfort for the boy who had once struggled with loneliness. Margaret often found herself marveling at the transformation Guardian had brought into their lives. "She's more than a dog," Margaret said one evening to her daughter during a phone call. "She's family. She's brought us back to life." Meanwhile, back at St. Mary's Hospital, Dr. Henry Carter found himself reflecting on the impact Guardian had left behind. The empty corner of the lobby, once bustling with visitors coming to see the remarkable dog, now served as a quiet reminder of her presence. Henry noticed the change within himself most profoundly. Before Guardian, he had buried himself in his work, keeping his emotions tightly locked away. But caring for her and witnessing her strength had opened something in him, a capacity for empathy and connection he hadn't realized he had lost. One afternoon, Emily, the young nurse who had supported Guardian from the beginning, found Henry sitting in his office, staring at an old photo of the dog and her pups. "You miss them, don't you?" she asked, handing him a steaming cup of tea. Henry chuckled softly. "I do. But it's not just that. She reminded me of things I'd forgotten, about what it means to truly care for someone, about resilience and the power of small acts of kindness." Emily smiled knowingly. "Guardian didn't just change the hospital, Dr. Carter. She changed you." Henry's newfound perspective began to show in his work. He took more time to connect with his patients, offering a kind word or a listening ear in ways he never had before. He even started volunteering at a local animal shelter on his days off, helping care for animals in need. "She taught me something," Henry told a fellow volunteer one afternoon as he gently cleaned the kennel of a nervous dog. "That sometimes healing isn't just about medicine. It's about love, patience, and the willingness to fight for what matters." Back at Margaret's home, life continued to blossom. The seasons changed, and the once cold winter days gave way to the warmth of spring. Guardian, now thriving, seemed to embrace every moment of her new life. Whether it was playing with Oliver in the garden, lounging by Margaret's feet on the porch, or leading her pups on small adventures around the yard, she had become the heart of the family. For Margaret and Oliver, Guardian was more than a pet. She was a symbol of hope and a reminder that even after the darkest times, joy could be found again. For Henry, she was a teacher, a quiet but profound influence, who had reignited his belief in the power of compassion. Guardian's journey, though marked by hardship, had become a story of resilience, love, and the beauty of second chances. She had found her home, her family, and her purpose, a new joy for all who had the privilege of knowing her. The days following Guardian's departure were quieter than Dr. Henry Carter had anticipated. The corner of the hospital lobby, where she and her puppies had once rested, now stood empty, and the absence was palpable. Though he knew Margaret and Oliver would give her the loving home she deserved, Henry couldn't help but feel a void. Guardian had left an indelible mark on his heart, one that he hadn't expected to linger so deeply. But her departure also stirred something new in him, a desire to continue her legacy in some small way. Guardian had shown him the transformative power of love and connection, and he wasn't ready to let that go. On a crisp Saturday morning, Henry made his way to a nearby animal shelter. The scent of straw, disinfectant, and eager barking greeted him as he entered. A cheerful volunteer approached, her clipboard in hand. "Looking to adopt?" she asked, her smile warm. Henry hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes," he said. "I'd like to meet some of the older dogs if that's possible." The volunteer's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. We have a few senior dogs who would love a quiet home. Come with me." Henry followed her to a row of kennels where several older dogs rested quietly. His attention was drawn to one kennel in particular, where a scruffy terrier mix lay curled up on a worn blanket. The dog lifted his head as Henry approached, his brown eyes filled with a mix of weariness and curiosity. "This is Charlie," the volunteer said, unlocking the gate. "He's about 10 years old and was surrendered a few months ago. His owner passed away, and he hasn't quite adjusted to shelter life. But he's a sweetheart." Henry crouched down, his eyes meeting Charlie's. The dog hesitated before rising slowly, his movements stiff with age. He approached Henry cautiously, sniffing his outstretched hand before pressing his head gently against it. "Hello, old friend," Henry murmured, stroking Charlie's scruffy fur. "Looks like we could both use some company." The adoption process was straightforward, and by that afternoon Charlie was settling into Henry's apartment. The dog explored his new surroundings with quiet curiosity, his tail wagging faintly as he sniffed each corner. Life with Charlie was different from what Henry had experienced with Guardian. There were no playful antics or bursts of energy. Charlie's age showed in his slower pace and preference for naps over play, but in his calm demeanor, Henry found a sense of peace. Mornings became their favorite time together. Henry would brew his coffee while Charlie sat by the window, watching the world wake up outside. They developed a routine of short, leisurely walks in the nearby park, where Charlie often stopped to enjoy the sunlight filtering through the trees. One day, as they strolled along the park path, Henry noticed Charlie's subtle way of connecting with people. A passing jogger paused to pet him, her expression softening as Charlie leaned into her touch. A young child giggled as Charlie wagged his tail, offering a gentle nuzzle. "He's a natural healer," Henry thought, smiling to himself. As the weeks turned into months, Henry felt his life transform in ways he hadn't expected. Charlie's quiet companionship taught him to slow down, to appreciate the small moments of joy that often went unnoticed. On particularly quiet evenings, Henry would sit by the fireplace with Charlie at his feet, reflecting on how much his life had changed since Guardian first appeared. He found himself more patient, more compassionate, and more open to the world around him. "She taught me so much," Henry said one evening, scratching behind Charlie's ears. "And now you're here to carry it forward." Charlie thumped his tail softly in response, his brown eyes filled with trust. Henry began volunteering regularly at the animal shelter where he had found Charlie, helping other senior dogs find homes. He shared Guardian's story with anyone who would listen, hoping to inspire others to open their hearts to animals in need. "She showed me the power of resilience," he often said, "and Charlie reminds me every day that love doesn't fade with age, it deepens." Though Charlie's steps grew slower with time, his presence brought a warmth to Henry's life that never wavered. Together, they forged a bond rooted in quiet understanding and mutual gratitude. On a bright autumn morning, as they walked through the park, Henry glanced down at Charlie and smiled. The dog, though older and greyer than when they first met, still exuded the same quiet dignity that had drawn Henry to him. "You've changed me, old boy," Henry said softly, "just like she did." Charlie wagged his tail, his gentle spirit a reminder of the love that had brought them together, a love that carried forward, creating a new journey for them both.